Hi people, how are you doing? This is not necessarily the best night to do a deconstruction video because we got thunder and lightning going on and rain, heavy rain in London tonight, but it's the only opportunity I've got to do this. And this is the new single, which is out right now on pre-order on Traxsource. And it's a song called Memory, and this features a singer called Jenny Adesanya, who you may remember from ITV's The Voice, and she was one of Tom Jones's groups, I guess, as So Diva, and she's got an incredible performance on this song. This version you're listening to now is a special club mix.
I can feel your hands touching me, holding me, loving me.
And the version, the one that's kind of the most commercial is not this one, and that's a two-step mix which really blends up R&B, two-step garage. But this one's designed for the clubs on the garage house scene. Well, already it's been placed at #1 in Mark Cottrell's Traxsource chart, so big shout out to Mark, thank you for that. Getting some amazing responses on this so far, so thanks to everybody for your comments. And what I want to do is, usually I focus on things like drums and, I've done that so many times, but I wanted to focus on this video on the musical elements because there's a couple of things I want to point out that are kind of bespoke, really, for this composition. And that includes some sound design, so we'll take a look at that. So why don't we start with those chords? And what I've got here is a principle of kind of call and response. Okay, so you've heard of me talking of this concept before. Call and response is where you have something that happens and then something that happens after. It's, in a way, there's a question and then there's an answer. And so musically, that's happening with the chords. So I've got a call chord here. I'm going to play this for you now. That's actually coming from the Chord Triton. So there's nothing bespoke here. This is a preset. It's an organ sound. It's gospel 1-JS pipe KN. It's an interesting preset name, but it's a great sound. The chords, you can take a look at these here. So these are the notes being used. And so as I said, that's the call, and the response is coming from another instrument. So let's take a listen to that now. So when I say call and response, it's that kind of filtered chord that's coming back, which is the response. In some essence, parts of the response actually have the call because there's the bass notes. And let me just focus on this. Let's solo that. So these lower notes are the ones that I was talking about. So actually there's a bit of a call response going on within that progression, but I kind of separate these two out. So once again, let's have a listen to this. Love the way that those two work together. But let me talk about this response synth, and I'm going to bring this to the foreground now. So a month or so back, there was a great deal on Phase Plant, and this is a synthesizer by Kilohertz, and this company makes lots of really great modular effects units. They've got some really cool approaches to chaining together effects and running effects in series or in parallel. It's a very flexible interface. But this is a synthesizer, and you can design your own sounds. And I got into this because I was reading someone on Twitter talking about some sound design they were doing and then providing some examples. And it's the most incredible examples of sound design that I've heard. So I thought, that's a synth I want to start learning. So to start on a simple basis, I thought I'd take some of the kind of sounds that I enjoy and recreate them inside Phase Plant. This is a very simple instrument. So I've called it 90s brass synth velo because it's velocity responsive. And you can see what's going on here. So I selected away from the analog module and it was a sawtooth, but I've played around with it a bit here. So it's not a conventional sawtooth. There's a real texture to this. And then what I've done is I've made it wider by using the spread controls here. And then I've got it running through a ladder filter, which is modulated by the envelope down here. And what's great is, you can see here all of the different ways that you can route your modulation. So it's a very, very interesting approach, a very visual approach to creating sound. So that's a very characteristic element of this particular production. And let's listen to that in solo. So that's one of the main sections, and it's got this really kind of bumpy, old school vibe to it that works really nicely. And it was really, for me, it's great to have created the sound from scratch and to be able to use it. I've been using a lot of instruments like the Chord Triton in my productions that have kind of like synth brass patches. So it's great to be able to do something of my own. Now there's a progression here. I've coloured it in blue. So in a way, this is a middle eight. It's a contrast. Let me show you the chords. Because I find sometimes if you have the same thing going on throughout a track, it can get boring. So I like to switch things up a little bit, and it's very reminiscent of the original chord progression, but it's different notes, the same kind of pattern, so it's familiar. And what's happening here is that the call and response is kind of inverted. So this is more like the call, and then the original one becomes the response. Sorry, I've just jumped to the wrong place. Let's try again. And by the way, there's a bit of latency going on, so you're not hearing the sound at the same time as a visual. But don't worry, hopefully you'll still get something from this. So that's what's going on there. And then what happens is to create a sense of drama, I've got a section here that's really quite interesting. I took one of those chords and I extended it out. And then what I did was I added some additional notes on top with another synth here. So this over time progresses in complexity and then has a lot of notes towards the end. And then we kind of come back again. So let me play the whole section without any soloing. And on this section also there's some vocals coming up. You can see these being triggered here and they're being filtered. So here are those additional notes of the pad coming in. Here are those sustained notes building up. And we're back to that verse. So the structure of this is interesting because the full song has verses and choruses. This doesn't have the chorus, it has the verses, but then in essence the chorus is replaced by the kind of dancey, bumpy synth, polysynth and organ section. So that's what's going on there. Let me just solo these for you so you can hear those elements together. So the organ, the polysynth, and then those pad notes. So it's creating a build without needing any kind of like snare fills or anything like that. Another very important element of this track is the bass line. And let me solo this. I'm going to take it back. Let's go back to the original section. Now, this is deliberately reminiscent of Spend the Night, the H-Man dub, the bass that was played by Julian Jonah. And this is coming from a Native Instruments instrument. And I will show you this. It's called Prime Bass. It's a fantastic electric bass recreated as a virtual instrument. So I love the tone of this. it's got a real vibe to it. So I played those notes in. I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of things going on here that make it sound much, much more interesting. So what I'm doing here, my gosh, the rain is so heavy. Here are the notes, right? But there is something interesting going on with this extended note. And you may be able to understand what that is. If I switch this down, let's go to MIDI control, pitch bend. So I'm using the pitch wheel, which has come from the Native Instruments Complete S61. I'm bending the notes up on the sustain sections, which makes it sound much more interesting. And of course, you know, the bass, those chords that we listened to earlier, all working really nicely together. And in fact, those bass notes are very important on that section I was just talking about, you know, this build up. So the pad is developing here. In fact, also there's another synth. Yeah, no, it's the pad. Don't worry, I'm thinking of something else. And then the bass is adding a sense of extra tension being triggered in that way. So no longer bending, just a straight up plug. Filters are being used a lot to create some change in the sound. So if I drop down and show you the automation here, this is simply the auto filter. So you can see it's gone down, so taking away the highs. Gradually bringing those back whilst the verse is there. There's a riser coming from Serum. You'll hear that soon. I've got a real big delay on the vocal there. And so, you know, what's happening here is like I said, the chorus isn't coming in, even though on the two-step mix, the chorus would come in at that point. This is more now of a kind of dance section. So the vocal echoing off into the distance is a bridge between these two, and it sounds super hyped the way it works there. So very happy with this, and I'm trying to think of other things that I should draw to your attention at the moment. There is another pad here. I really like what this does with the music, so I'm going to solo these elements now. And this is another cool Triton patch. It's called Lush Anna Strings. Very subtle in the background, but it's new. This is the first time that you hear this in the track. I mean, absolutely incredible vocals. I will try on another video to really focus on those. And in fact, I think it would be better to do so on the original two-step mix, which has a real orchestral vibe, you know, like a John Barry score for a James Bond movie, which is very deliberate. But I programmed everything in the orchestra, so it's something that's definitely worth a separate video. And in fact, this track was made actually a long time ago. The demo was radically different, and then I kind of put it aside, got some space from it, then did an entirely new backing. That was the orchestral kind of James Bond thing. Then I had some space from it, possibly even a year, and then came back and thought, right, I need new mixes. So that's where this is, and it's important because not a lot of people know me for two-step garage. So it was kind of a gamble to do something like that, and I knew that, you know, my existing kind of audience would want to hear something like this. That's the whole point in this. So at the moment, I've got 3 mixes with instrumentals available on pre-order, and each one is tackling a different kind of world sonically. Now, the last thing that I should probably talk about here on this video is the mastering chain. And what's happening here is that I've gone back to using the Waves L2, and I really missed it. It's one of these things, if you trace back through my videos, I used to use it. But then I upgraded the Mac operating system, and then I got to the point where you have to do this paid upgrade for any of the plugins you have, and I just resisted. I thought, I'm not going to do this. But then I looked out of curiosity fairly recently at the upgrade for just that L2 limiter, and it was super cheap, so I paid for it. Okay, and I'm really happy to have it back. Now my chain here is kind of weird. I've got the Brainworks Master Desk True Peak, but I'm not using it for limiting really. I'm using it for a few things. I've got this resonance filter on at 315 Hertz. I'm bringing out the bass. I'm also bringing out the highs using the presence here, and I'm adding some stereo width. Right? That's what this is doing. It's not really being used to compress. Next, I've got another plugin Alliance plugin that I bought, which is this kind of modern day Pultec. This is the Better Maker EQ 232D. This is boosting a little bit, a couple of dBs at 60 Hertz. It's also using this attenuation control to create that real classic Pultec EQ curve. And also, did I brighten that here as well? I can't remember. No, I didn't. No, so that's what I'm using that for. It's a great plugin for making things just sound better. It's a great name, Better Maker. Now I'm using also this Soma mastering EQ. What I did here is, you can see I took a cut of nearly 2 dBs. Sorry, it's late, I'm tired. 2 kilohertz, 2200. Okay, so I did a dip there. Also, I did a dip here at is that 1.8 kilohertz of minus 2 dBs, because I felt it was sounding a little bit harsh. So that's what that's doing, smoothing it out in those frequencies. And then finally the classic L2. Okay, so that's my limiter with a ceiling of minus 0.3 dBs. So that's it. So that's the Garage House mix of Memory. So it's Danny J. Lewis featuring Jenny Adesanya. And it's available on Traxsource pre-order now. It's going to be available for download actually on Friday, and that's the 9th of September. But equally, check out the two-step mix, which will be everywhere over streaming. It's definitely commercial, but it's a mixture of R&B and two-step garage, already being played by the two-step DJs on the UK garage scene. So thanks to everybody for the support. I heard it on Merlin's show the other night. So yeah, once again, I don't have tons of time for making videos or even commenting or responding, but I will try. So if you do have any questions, just put them down and I'll see if I can get back to you. Okay? All right. Take care.